Artists have always learned methods and techniques by copying the artwork of other artists, and especially the old masters. What you won't get by blindly copying are explanations about how the masters created their works. I produced this film to teach you why they use specific methods and techniques to create their masterpieces. You will gain knowledge that will increase your skill for copying old master paintings, and you will understand how to apply these methods to your own artwork. This film is the first of a series of films on deconstructing old master paintings. In this episode, I will discuss the importance of using edges in a painting and how the old masters use edges to create many different visual effects. Let's take a look and see how the old masters use edges to help them create these amazing paintings. Today we'll look at a painting by Vermeer. I will discuss how he used edges as a tool in his paintings to create different effects. Let's take a look at this painting, Study of a Young Woman by Johannes Vermeer. This painting is in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. I picked this painting because it's a great example of Vermeer's use of edges. Vermeer was a master of edges, among other things. Now let's start by finding the lost and found edges he painted. Look at how Vermeer handled his outside edges around the hair and background. The outside edge of the hair against the background is completely lost. An edge that is lost against the background or foreground is called a big blur, or a lost edge. An edge that is both very soft and close in value to the background will give the object roots to the background or foreground of the picture. This edge is usually undefined, lost or melted into its surroundings. Our brain tells us that there should be an edge, visual line, or even strands of hair visible around the outside of the hair. Vermeer chose not to define that line in value, edge, or hair strands. He left us, the viewer, to imagine where the outside edge of the hair would be. Therefore, it was not necessary to define it with paint. As viewers, we are aware of the hair as we can see the hairline against the forehead and the drapery tied to the back of her hair. Our eyes complete the oval of the outside line or edge of her hair. We don't see any strands of her hair either. The hair has almost no detail whatsoever. The hairline and drapery seem to be enough to complete the form. The softness in edges also creates the illusion of hair. The hairline against the forehead, cheek, and neck are more defined, but the edges are very soft. The reason he painted the hairline with such a soft edge was to keep your eye focused on harder, more defined edges in the center of the girl's face. The hairline also goes back and away from our eye. We can barely see the back of the girl's head, but we can see a slight separation of value between the outside hairline and the drapery behind her hair. This edge would also be considered a lost edge or big blur, as it is very close in value to the drapery. The edge is also very soft and just illuminated enough to see the shape of the back of her head. Now, the edge of the girl's face in the light is also very soft. We can see this edge as the overall value of her face is very light in value compared to the dark background value. The very light value next to the very dark value creates a lot of contrast. I will discuss a little bit about value in this film, as value usually goes hand in hand with the development of edges. So if you want the girl's face to stand out, then why not sharpen the outside edge of the face against the background? Well, if Vermeer was to sharpen the outside edge of the girl's face, the viewer's eye would focus on the edge of the face, flattening the illusion of three-dimensional form. In order to create the illusion of three-dimensional form on a two-dimensional surface, the viewers must believe that they are looking around the form and not at a sharp outside edge. The hardest outside edge of the face is around the girl's chin. The chin is bone and would naturally have harder edges than softer, fleshy areas of the face. The front of the chin also comes forward. If every outside edge is sharp and defined, the object or head in this case would look like it was cut out with a scissor and pasted down on the background. It's up to the artist to direct the viewer's eye to where they want them to go in the picture. Let's zoom in to the outside edge of the girl's face. We can see that Vermeer also painted a soft, thin, neutral line at the very edge of the face, about one value darker than the average surrounding value of the face. He then softened the neutral edge against the face and the background. This neutral line further keeps your eyes off the edge of the face, as this line is neutral, meaning it has less chroma or brightness of color compared to the features in the center of the face. Your eye is more attracted to brighter chroma. Vermeer used 3 techniques to help him create the illusion of three-dimensional form: neutralizing the edge, softening the edge, darkening the value of the outside edge. The edge of the girl's jaw on the right side of her face, or the shadow side, is also very soft. This edge of the face is soft as it is an edge in shadow. Outside edges in the shadows are often painted much softer than edges on the light side. The girl's jaw might often be a harder edge as it is bone, and bone is obviously harder than, say, the soft area of a cheek. However, the jaw area we see is in the shadow, and edges get softer in shadows. We create soft edges in shadows as we don't want the viewer's eye to look into the shadows. There is also much less detail and contrast visible in the shadows. We can see that the girl's face on the shadow side is close in value to the shadow cast on her neck. The shadow side plane of the girl's face and jawline is not a big blur, as we can see the edge and difference in value. The shadow plane on her face is visibly yet subtly separated from her neck by a small value difference in the shadows, reflected light, and more chromatic color on her cheek. The shadow plane on the girl's neck is darker than the cheek in value, since the neck is both set below, further away from, or under the face. In other words, the neck form is further away from our eyes than the cheek is. We are also aware that the girl's jaw area closest to her chin has more contrast next to the neck compared to the areas of her jaw that set back towards her hairline. Vermeer understood how to use edges and the effects they create. Hard edges advance, high contrast values advance, dark values recede, soft edges recede. The girl's face is also casting a shadow on her neck. Cast shadows are usually darker in value than the core or average shadow value of the object casting the shadow. The only time a cast shadow is lighter than the core shadow is when the object casting the shadow is darker in local value. For example, a dark cube would have a darker core shadow than the white surface it's casting its shadow on. The girl's hairline is also much softer against her face on the shadow side. We can see a little bit of her ear, which is also painted with soft edges, as well as the harder edge highlights of her pearl earring. The light on the girl's chin is also lighter in value than the light on her neck, as the chin is closer to both the viewer and the light source than the neck is. This projects the chin form out in front of the neck. Let's now look at the core or average shadow value on the girl's face. Vermeer has created a very soft, dark halftone on the shadow side of the girl's face. This dark halftone is the value that creates a soft value transition between the core shadow and the light on her cheek. As you can see, there is a very subtle line between the core shadow and the light. The shadow is much darker than the light, but Vermeer has created a wider dark halftone in order to soften the light plane against the shadow. This soft dark halftone edge helps to turn the light side of the form into the dark side, helping with the illusion of three-dimensional form. The softer and wider dark halftone was used on the girl's forehead, where the line between shadow and light is barely perceptible. The forehead is a larger and wider form than the cheek, and therefore the dark halftone must be wider in order to turn this larger form properly. The value transition Vermeer created on the forehead is quite amazing in its subtle modeling from light to dark values. We can barely see where the plane begins and ends, Yet we are well aware of the turning of the large and lightest form of the forehead as it turns effortlessly into the shadow plane. Big wide objects have wider halftones as it takes them longer to turn or a larger transition between values. A smaller thin form would have a smaller and thinner halftone as it will turn more quickly. For example, you would paint a thin dark halftone and short value transition between light and dark values on a straw. You would paint a wider and larger dark halftone or value transition between light and dark on a globe. Let's examine the features of the girl's face. We seem to be drawn to her eyes. The eyes are the center of interest in this portrait. The eyes have the most contrast in value with some sharper edges between light and dark areas. We can see that Vermeer left a hard edge against the bright white highlight on the eyeball next to the dark iris on one eye and pupil on the other eye. He also left the edges on the irises a bit sharper next to the whites of the eyes. The harder edge of the top portion of the eyelid on her eye draws us in and holds our focus on the eyes, leading us from left to right and locking us into her gaze. The edges against her bottom eyelid becomes a bit sharper near the iris on her right eye. Her left eye bottom lid is softer than the bottom lid of her right eye, as it is further away from the light source. Her bottom eyelid is separated by a big difference in value. He left the shadows in the eye sockets very soft and undefined so that the viewer would focus directly on her eyes. Your eye does not go to the edge of the face, it moves around it. Now Vermeer has achieved something quite incredible, as he was able to lose yet another edge. This lost edge happens to be the edge on the light plane of her nose. The nose is bony and narrow, so it's easy to define the planes of the nose by creating harder edges and sharper highlights. Yet Vermeer was interested in creating a simplicity in this portrait. He did not want to define every feature. He chose to lose or soften the edge of the light plane on her nose against the light plane of her cheek. He knew that sharpening this edge was not going to contribute to anything in this portrait. He was interested in simplifying the head. The value on the light plane of her nose is lighter in value than her cheek, and that was all the separation of planes that was needed. The lighter plane on the nose projects it forward off of the cheek, but the edge is still lost. So we pulled it off. We are well aware of the structure of her nose, as the shadow side of the nose and cast shadow define the nose form. The shadow side of her nose is very soft as well. As you can see, the nose is a small, thin form that has a thinner dark halftone that turns more quickly than the dark halftones on the larger head form. The edge of the highlight along the right edge near the shadow is a bit harder and helps project the nose forward towards the viewer. We can see the edge of the eye socket and cast shadow from the nose are a bit more defined, but not sharp. This is called holding the edge, as we don't want it to be paper sharp, but we also don't want to lose it completely. In other words, we just want to be aware of it, but not draw our eye so closely as to compete with forms that have harder edges like the eyes. As we move towards the mouth, we can see that Vermeer held the edges of the upper lip, as it is a thinner, faster turning plane. So we see a bigger jump in value along with harder edges. Harder and softer edges will change the appearance of value as well. Harder edges will create the appearance of bigger jumps in value. Remember that everything is relative. The accent on the right side of the mouth between the top and bottom lip is also an area of value change that draws our eyes in. Accents are areas that have less light exposure than all other areas. The bottom lip is barely visible, as it is close to the value of her chin and the edges are very soft. The bottom lip is fatter and much less defined than the upper lip. Vermeer also lost the lower shadow edge of the bottom lip, as there is virtually no edge defined and it's close in value to the surrounding area of the chin. The thing that separates the bottom lip from the chin is its brighter pink chroma next to the more neutral chroma of the chin. Vermeer painted harder edges on areas of the draperies as they were used to lead the viewer's eye to the center of interest, the head. You can see that the drapery tied to her hair has a sharper edge in the front and darker in value towards the back, where the edge is completely lost. The drapery on her body looks somewhat heavy with big folds, and that helps lead our eye to her head. He has defined the front edges of the draperies and lost the back edges into the background. The artist is showing you where he wants your eye to go. You have to be able to learn to direct the viewer's eye within your own paintings. All paintings need a center of interest or focal point, and edges help you direct the viewer's eyes. I hope you can now start to understand how Vermeer has masterfully handled his edges and how you might apply the same methods to your own paintings. In conclusion, edges help create form, edges lead the eye, edges create plane changes, edges create value changes, edges send objects back in space, edges bring objects forward, edges create mood, edges create atmosphere. Try practicing this yourself. Look at paintings online or in a museum. See if you can find the lost and found edges, and look for all the relationships you can find in the pictures.